This episode goes out to iTunes reviewer Fancy Pantalo. Today's snark is for you. Hi there, Garrett Robinson here. Welcome to the 4th episode of the Nightblade Epic Podcast Season 3. We just have one quick announcement for you today. Some friends and I just launched a new show. It's called Natural 20 Proof, and it's a live Dungeons & Dragons show that goes out once a week. You know Critical Role? Well, it's not even close to that good, so forget I said that, but it's the same idea. Episode 1 just broadcast yesterday. My friends and I have been working on this show for months now, and we are so proud and happy with how it came out. You can find us on Twitch at twitch.tv/nat20proof, where we broadcast live every Sunday at 1 o'clock p.m. We're also on YouTube at nat20proof, where episodes come out every Thursday, and pretty soon we'll also be releasing the show in podcast form, so you'll be able to find it right here. Please, go check out the show and let me know what you think. I really hope you enjoy it. Once again, the name is Natural 20 Proof. Okay, now it's time for today's episode. Today, you're getting chapters 6 and 7 of Darkfire. When we left off, mystics had stormed through the door to attack Lauren and her friends in the town of Strapa. Enjoy! Darkfire, Chapter 6. Lauren was saved only by her sharp reflexes, heightened as they were by her growing sense of danger. When the first mystic swung his blade, she dropped to the ground and rolled past him. From the floor, she struck out at the open door with a mighty kick. It slammed shut just as a woman tried to burst through, catching her head between door and frame. She slumped senseless to the ground, her red cloak billowing on the floor around her. No more followed. Jem and Annis scrambled for the corner while Lauren was still fighting to her feet. Another sword swing nearly took her head off, but again she leaped from its path. 4 mystics had joined Derek now. 2 stood beside him, pinning Jordell in the corner, while the third went for Jem and Annis. The last had set his sights on Lauren, and she could almost sense his frustration as she eluded his attacks. He was a large man, greater even than Jordell, and 2 heads taller than Lauren. His nose was flat and wide, and there was a murderer's fury in his glare. Almost she reached for the dagger at her belt, but she stopped herself at the last second. She would not kill this man, nor anyone else in the room, and if they recognized her weapon and survived, she was doomed. Her opponent thrust his blade forwards, but by now Lauren had found her balance and sidestepped easily. He wore a heavy coat of chain, and his sight was somewhat obscured by an open-faced helmet. It was an easy matter to avoid his strokes again and again, stepping back each time, but she had no way to retaliate, and one strike from those massive arms would end the fight. The children were faring worse. Jem had dived beneath the table and pulled Annis with him, but they had not been ignored. A mystic grabbed Annis's leg and dragged her out. She clung to the table screaming while the mystic tried to pry her fingers loose. Jem emerged and flew for the man's legs in a tackle, but his slight form did nothing. The man dropped his sword and reached for a dagger, lifting it high to plunge into Jem's back. Lauren gave a shout and ducked another swing, running past her foe to help. She leaped and seized the mystic's knife hand before he could strike, and the weight from her jump bore them both over. They landed on the table with Lauren on top, their weight smashing the flimsy wood to splinters. This man wore no helmet, and even as he winced from the fall, Lauren seized his collar. Her fist drew back and she struck once, twice, 3 times, twice on the cheek and once in the temple. His eyes rolled back in his head and his hands flopped to the ground. Annis cried a warning even as Lauren felt the presence of the huge mystic behind her. She rolled to the side at the last second, and a flashing sword pierced the space where she had been, then carried on and into the body of the mystic she had knocked unconscious. His eyes snapped open as he gave a startled cry, only to gurgle his last breath as blood bubbled from his lips. Lauren cried out in horror, but the mystic barely looked distressed. He straightened and tugged on his sword, but it stayed put. He looked down at it, piggish eyes squinting as he tugged harder. but the sword was buried deep in bone and flesh and had sunk into the wooden table beneath for good measure. Her gaze snapped to a flash of movement as Jem dove to the ground behind the man. She saw his aim and leaped shoulder first. Sharp pain shot through her as it struck his chainmail, but her weight threw him backwards. He struck Jem and tumbled, his head slamming into the bookcase on the wall. The shelves fell, sending leather tomes crashing down on him just before the bookcase itself. "Jem!" cried Lauren. She saw a tiny, scrawny leg jutting out from beneath the mess. But it wiggled with life, so she seized and tugged. Jem emerged from the pile, sputtering and cursing with a sailor's tongue. Lauren looked to Jordell. He stood against the room's far wall, backed into a corner. 3 mystics still faced him, Derek standing between the other 2. But Derek's swings were wide and sloppy, and it kept his companions from striking. Jordell was holding his own, at least for now. Before Lauren could run to help him, the bookcase shifted. The giant mystic threw it off and clambered to his feet. He had lost his helmet. An angry red gash crossed his forehead, and on his cheek was a welt that would surely bruise. But his eyes were angry and bright as ever, and he had recovered his sword. "Get behind me," said Lauren, seizing Jem's arm and throwing him back. The mystic advanced. She raised her fists helplessly, backing up step by step. He struck with the force of an ox, but just as slowly. Again she was able to dodge him, but he carried on past her, heading for Jem and Annis. Lauren leaped from behind and landed on his back, where she clung as she wrapped an arm around his throat. She gripped her wrist with the opposite hand, using the strength of both arms to pull tight around his windpipe. The mystic staggered and fell to one knee, but though he was slow, he was uncommonly strong. One hand reached back and seized Lauren by the nape of her neck. Bodily he flung her off, hurling her over his shoulder and into the wall beside Annis and Jem. She struck it hard and landed badly, all her breath knocked out. Her arms scrabbled on the floor as she tried to rise, but she could not force her legs to move. He stood and took another step forwards. Jem put himself between the man and Annis, eyes burning with defiance. At the last second he leaped, trying once again to take the mystic down by the legs. A meaty fist lashed out and struck him, and Jem fell heavily to the ground. The mystic turned and went for him, slowly, with the inevitability of a rock slide. His sword flashed in the light through the window as he raised it high. Annis gave a cry of rage and hurled herself forwards. She fell to her knees before Jem, wrapping her arms around him and defiantly staring up at the mystic. The man paused for a moment, his sword held high. Frantically, Lauren looked around. She had fallen near the cooking fire, and the kettle still sat in the coals. Her hand wrapped around the handle as she scrambled to her feet, and she threw the pot with all her might at the mystic. It struck him hard in the back of the head, and he fell forwards. The children barely scrambled out of the way in time. The man landed hard and did not move again. Annis drew her legs away from his prone form and clutched Jem harder. All the boy's limbs shook as he held on hard to her sleeve. Lauren wanted to ensure they were all right, but she had no time. Jordell was still backed into the corner, his blade dancing to keep Derek and the other mystics at bay. Lauren picked up the kettle again and cracked the closest one over the head. Derek and his companion turned in surprise, but when he saw what Lauren had done, Derek whirled on the last mystic in an instant. He plunged his sword into the woman's chest, through her cloak and mail. The mystic's surprise erupted in a death gasp, eyes staring wide and fearful into Derek's, and then she fell. All of them froze in shock, all except Derek, who drew his blade from the corpse with a harsh tug. He turned to Jordell, who raised his weapon again, but Derek only wiped his sword clean on the fallen woman's cloak and returned it to his scabbard. "Forgive me," said Derek quickly. "I had no choice, and this one was a poison within our ranks. The Order will not miss her. I could not help you openly before, but now there will be no witnesses." Jordell's face twisted in wrath, and he did not lower his weapon. "You brought violence upon a sister of the Order, Derek. It is not your place to judge who is fit to wear the red cloak." "They would not have stopped until you lay dead," said Derek. "And so you must go, quickly, for there are more of us in Strapa. I am not in command. I was only sent to earn your trust, for our masters know of the past that you and I share." All was silent, and for a moment Lauren feared Jordell might cut Derek down. But at last he sheathed his sword, though the grim look did not leave. "Very well. You say there are others. Where are they?" "Away from here, outside the village, yet near enough to strike. Even now they may approach. Gain your horses and flee Struppa before they find you." "It will go ill for you when they find you alone. What will you do?" Derek looked at his feet, ashamed at last. "I thought I might ask a boon of you in that regard, though I have done nothing to earn your favor. I do not wish to be exiled. I am a mystic true, though you may doubt it, but they cannot find me unharmed when all of you have fled." Jordell's face softened, and he nodded. "I understand." Then he drew his weapon and lifted it high. "No!" cried Lauren, but Jordell struck before she could interfere. The pommel of his sword crashed hard into Derek's head, and the man fell. "He is not harmed, not as sorely as some of the others at any rate," said Jordell. "This way it will seem he was overcome trying to prevent our escape." "You believe his tale, then?" said Jem. "It seems a fine enough thing to say after he already lost the fight, but I do not put much faith in the words of one who slew his own companion." "I thought something was amiss before then," said Jordell. "Derek is a good swordsman, yet he fought poorly to keep the others from striking at me. In any case, it is done, and we should hearken to his words. Out the door, quickly!" Lauren led the way, throwing the door open, but she froze on the threshold. Before her stood another 5 redcloaks, all with arrows drawn. She barely had time to fling the door shut again. 5 sharp thunks sounded against it. "There are more outside," she said, "armed with bows. We are trapped." "Things are not as dire as all that," said a voice. They looked to the window in the back of the house. There stood Alburn, the bowyer, his face freshly shaven, a spark of grim humor in his eye. "A pretty sight you all make," said Alburn, "though I imagined I might look worse after a fight such as that." "You were watching us?" said Lauren. "I keep an eye on those who interest me, but you can provide me no amusement if you perish. Come, if you wish my help to escape. Otherwise, try the front door again, and see if you can persuade your foes to show mercy." Lauren met Jordell's look, but they needed only a moment. What choice did they have? Together they lifted Jem through the window, followed by Annis, with Alburn lowering them gently on the other side. Then they climbed through themselves, leaving the 6 mystics behind. Darkfire, Chapter 7. The woods were only a few paces from the house, and Alburn led them there in a low, running crouch. Without thinking, Lauren muffled her footsteps, running toes first as she followed. It was a useless gesture, though, for Annis still crashed along as loud as ever. Once within the safety of the trees, Alburn stopped to duck behind a wide trunk. Lauren followed suit, and together they surveyed the house. The mystics had only just begun to circle around, approaching it from a 12 paces away. They seemed unaware that their quarry had escaped. "They shall notice our absence soon enough," said Alburn. "Fortunately, we will be well quit of this place before then." He set off again, leading them deeper into the woods. Soon they came to a small clearing. There, to Lauren's great surprise, stood their horses, along with 2 more, a sprightly bay and a sway-backed plow horse. "The bay is mine," said Alburn. "The other was for supplies, though I suppose the children may ride it, if they can ride at all." "What supplies?" said Lauren. "He means to take us into the mountains." Jordell fixed Alburn with a keen glare, and not an entirely happy one. "Was this your plan then, bowyer? To take advantage of us in a moment of peril? I do not like schemers." Alburn shrugged. "I told you yesterday, I rarely see such interesting travelers as yourselves. When I am interested in something, I look after it. and I did not have to look after you very long before I saw your pursuers close in. Once they did, I hazarded a guess that you might be more in need of a guide than you let on." Jordell still looked displeased, but Lauren spoke before he could. "Jordell, you know we cannot take the westerly road now. They will follow us upon it, and our 2 horses are overburdened. We must travel the mountain pass." "Very well," said Jordell. "We will take your services, Bowyer, though you will receive a fair price for your guidance and not a penny more, no matter how urgent our need." "I would ask for nothing greater," said Alburn. "I long for the diversion as much as for the coin, though diversion does not fill the coffers, as they say. 2 gold weights now, and 3 more when we reach Northwood at the northern end of the Great Rocks." Jordell's brows lifted slightly. 5 gold weights is a great bargain. "I told you I wished to ride again," said Alburn with a grin. "I shall pay you 3 now and 5 in Northwood," said Jordell. "But if I wish to take a different path than you say, we shall take it, and you must ask no questions about our journey or our business." "Done and done," said Alburn. "Though remind me never to let you bargain on my behalf, for I fear I might end up a pauper. Come, let us be off." Jordell handed him 3 gold weights, and then mounted while Lauren helped Jem and Annis to the back of the plow horse. Midnight greeted her with a nicker as she swung atop the mare's back, black cloak billowing behind her. But when Alburn made to lead the horses north, Jordell stopped him. "We have a burden," said the mystic. "West of the town, hidden in the forests. We must retrieve it before we go." "It must be a valuable cargo indeed for you to fetch it while so hotly pursued," said Alburn.
"You mean to go back for Zane?" said Annis, half angry, half afraid. "How do you think we can travel the mountain pass while dragging him behind us?"
Alburn frowned, and he looked from the children to Jordell. The mystic fixed him with a grim smile. "Do you still wish so badly to guide us, Bowyer? You might have taken a little more care when looking into your charges before you took them on." Alburn was silent for a moment, but then he shrugged. "Your business is your own, and I have said I will not ask questions. Neither will I answer them. Let us fetch this man, then."
"But our enemies are almost upon us,"
said Annis, voice thick with fear.
"They may catch us, even as we try to reach Zane."
"I hear your protests and the unspoken thoughts behind them, Annis," said Jordell with a sigh. "If you hate the idea of riding with Zane so badly, I have no hold upon you. You may leave if you wish, but I will not abandon him in the woods to die."
"Nor I,"
said Lauren softly, though it pained her to see the look in Annis's eyes.
"We may as well sink a dagger into his back ourselves as leave him bound without food or water."
Annis did not answer, but turned away to hide beneath her hood. Jem put a hand on her shoulder, his other arm still wrapped around her waist as he rode behind her. Jordell turned the horses and guided them south, picking their way quickly but carefully through the trees until they were well away from town. Then they cut west, riding at a brisk trot until they reached the woods beside the road. There they waited for a moment, looking hard in every direction to ensure no eyes were upon them before crossing the road at a gallop to reach the other side.
"And now we are nearly home free,"
chirped Jem.
"See, Annis, you worried for nothing."
"Hist," said Lauren.
"Confidence curses luck, especially when you need it most. Say not we are safe until we are in the mountains and know that we are not being followed."
Jordell led them unerringly through the forest in the direction of Zane's hiding place. Lauren wondered at that, for she could see no path for the mystic to follow. He seemed intimately familiar with these woods. She thought there must be a tale there, but as with so many matters concerning Jordell, she had no time to ask. Soon they reached the clearing where the great stones were stacked in a pile. The small cave was dark, and for a moment Lauren could not see Zane. Fear fluttered in her heart. Then she spotted the shape of his boot, stretching almost into the daylight, and soon saw the rest of him as her eyes adjusted to the darkness within. Zane did not look pleased to see them, nor did he look well. His face seemed more gaunt and pale. His hair stuck out, thin and wispy, and blood had turned his eyes pink. Jordell dismounted and brought the wizard forth, pulling him to his feet after untying his hands from the rocks. Then he tied Zane across the back of his horse, as he had done before. If Albern was dismayed, he did not show it. But he surveyed Jordell's doings with a cool and reserved eye, his mouth set in a stern line. Lauren could not imagine he was pleased at this development. If nothing else, it would slow their progress through the mountains. "I ask again, have you any regrets, Bowyer?" said Jordell. "Now is your last chance to return to your shop. After this moment there is no turning back, and I will not risk our lives in the mountains with a guide who wishes he were elsewhere. You may keep the gold I have given you, if you wish, for no doubt you saved us from the mystics within the village." "I will tell you again," said Albern. "I am not in the business of asking questions. One grows weary of staying in the same place, never leaving home or seeing new sights. I think a man such as yourself understands that." His words were haughty, yet Lauren saw Jordell relax. Still, he pressed the question. "You have seen already that we are fugitives from the mystics. I am a member of the order myself, recently exiled. You should also know that we flee the king's justice, though I can promise you we have done no deed too ill. Our only crime is keeping this wizard from the constables, for his will is not his own." "It is Magestone's, then?" said Albern. "I thought as much. He has the look. You do him a great service, though I doubt he is of the mind to thank you for it." Zane's angry glare over the cloth that gagged him was answer enough. Jordell hauled Zane's head up as he pulled forth a waterskin. This he jammed into the wizard's mouth, around the gag, and poured. Zane drank from it greedily, but coughed after a moment as he took too much in. Jordell closed the waterskin again, and then climbed into his saddle. "Very well, Albern of the family Telfer," said Jordell. "We accept your service, and I thank you for your persistence in offering it, though I was at first reluctant to accept." "And I thank you for the chance to put my feet upon the road again," said Albern. "Strapa is a fine place to live, yet one who has spent most of his life wandering will weary of any place in time." He nudged his horse north, Jordell following close behind. Lauren shared a look with Annis, who still seemed afraid, and then trotted after them. This has been a production of Legacy Books, written and narrated by Garrett Robinson. The music in this podcast was created by Will Musser. Check out his incredible work at willmusser.com. That's WILLMUSSER.com. Today's letter is J. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.